The music was still echoing in Ashley's ears when she stepped out of the Golden Star Banquet Hall in downtown Phoenix. It was the early hours of March 16, 1996, and the wet pavement of Jefferson Street glistened under the dim yellow glow of the streetlights. It had been the perfect night to celebrate her best friend Sophia's 20th birthday, a friendship that went all the way back to middle school. The five of them had saved for months to afford the new dresses, the heels, and the entrance fee for a party that promised to be unforgettable. Ashley adjusted the strap of her small purse while waiting for her friends to finish saying goodbye to the group of guys they'd met that night. Sophia, stunning in her favorite red dress, laughed at something a med student named Robert had said. Marina, the most cautious of the group, kept checking her watch, anxious about getting home late. Claudia and Fernanda, inseparable twins, debated whether to join the guys for a late-night breakfast at a 24-hour diner or stick to their original plan. "Come on, girls," Marina urged, glancing at her watch again. "It's almost 3 a.m., and I promised my mom I'd be home before 4. They had agreed to take the same bus back that had brought them downtown from the neighborhood where they all lived on the outskirts of Phoenix. It was a modest area, rows of small but well-kept houses where everyone knew each other and moms worried when their daughters stayed out late. Sophia said goodbye to Robert with a quick kiss on the cheek, promising to see him next weekend. "I'll call you Monday," he shouted as he and his friends headed toward the parking lot. The five girls walked down Jefferson Street, their heels clicking sharply on the damp pavement. Rain earlier that evening had left behind the earthy scent of wet asphalt, mingling with the smell of food from the few street vendors still open. "Are you sure the bus comes this way?" Claudia asked nervously when they reached the corner of Jefferson and 7th Avenue. It was her first time in this part of the city, and although Ashley had insisted she knew the route well, the dark made everything look different. "Of course," Ashley said confidently. "My cousin works nearby and told me 100 times the Line 8 bus comes down this street every 20 minutes, even at night." Fernanda, quiet until now, suddenly stopped. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, looking toward a narrow side street. To their right. The others froze, listening. Nothing. Just the distant hum of cars and faint music drifting from the Golden Star, now far behind them. "I don't hear anything," Marina said, though her voice carried a hint of unease. The area felt emptier than Ashley remembered. By day, the streets teemed with shoppers and office workers, but now they were deserted except for a few distant figures. A stray cat darted across their path, making Sophia squeal in surprise, which sent them all into nervous laughter. "There's the bus," Marina announced, pointing toward the approaching headlights. Relief washed over them as the familiar rumble of the diesel engine grew louder. The blue and white bus pulled up with its windows fogged from the night air. The driver, an older man with a gray mustache, nodded a greeting as they climbed aboard. "Heading to Oak Ridge?" he asked as Ashley paid the fare. "Yes, sir. End of the line," she replied, tucking the change into her purse. They settled into the hard green seats at the back. Besides them, only 3 other passengers rode along: a young man in work overalls returning from a late shift, an elderly woman burdened with grocery bags, and a teenager lost in his music, headphones clamped over his ears. The bus rolled through downtown Phoenix, past the cathedral whose lights still glowed, the historic Orpheum Theater with its grand facade, and the city plaza where homeless men had laid out makeshift beds on park benches. Sophia chattered about the party and Robert's smile while the twins debated whether to try the new club in Tempe next weekend or go back to the Golden Star. Marina, though, kept peering out the window like she expected something to appear. "You okay?" Ashley asked. "Yeah, just feels like someone's following us." The girls glanced back. Only a few cars trailed the bus at a distance. "You're just spooked because of that movie we saw," Fernanda teased, recalling the thriller about a missing woman they'd watched the week before. Marina smiled weakly, but kept watching the road behind them. As the bus moved farther from downtown, the streets grew darker, quieter. The architecture changed from old brick buildings to the modest homes of working-class neighborhoods. Ashley recognized every corner. She'd taken this route countless times after her shifts at the clothing store where she worked to help her. "Parents with bills. Only 3 stops left," she said. The man in overalls got off at Mesquite Drive, waving goodbye to the driver, who returned the gesture. The elderly woman struggled off one stop later, arms loaded with groceries. The teenager with headphones stayed on, lost in his music. Then Fernanda saw it. "That car," she whispered, pointing toward a dark sedan idling near the next bus stop, engine running, lights off. "It's been behind us for miles." All five stared at the car, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. "Probably waiting for someone," Sophia said, though her voice lacked its earlier cheer. "Or maybe it's a cab." But Ashley had noticed it too. That same car had followed them since downtown, never passing, never falling back. The bus driver, whose name tag read Carl, had seen it in his mirrors as well. 20 years on the job had sharpened his instincts. And this felt wrong. He decided to test it. Instead of taking the usual route, he turned down a side street. The sedan followed. "Girls," Carl said, glancing back. "That car's tailing us. Any of you know someone driving a dark sedan?" They shook their heads. No one did. "What should we do?" Marina asked, her voice trembling. The night's carefree mood had vanished, replaced by a creeping fear. The twins clutched each other's hands. Carl made a decision. "I'm taking you straight to the police station on Roosevelt Avenue. Better safe than sorry." Carl changed course again, heading toward the nearest police station. For a moment it looked like the dark sedan would keep following. It trailed them for 2 more blocks, engine humming low, but then suddenly turned sharply down a side street and disappeared into the darkness. "It's gone," Ashley whispered, realizing she'd been holding her breath for what felt like forever. Maybe it had been just a coincidence, but Carl didn't buy it. "I'm taking you girls straight to your houses," he said firmly. "I don't like the feel of this." The rest of the ride passed in tense silence. The laughter, the gossip, the leftover glow from Sophia's birthday, all of it was gone now. They kept scanning the streets through the foggy bus windows, hoping not to see that car again. When the bus finally reached Oak Ridge, Carl pulled up at the corner where all 5 girls lived, just a few blocks apart. It was a quiet neighborhood of working-class families where kids rode bikes in the streets, neighbors greeted each other by name, and nothing bad ever seemed to happen. "Girls, please be careful," Carl said as they stepped off. "If you see anything strange, anything at all, run home and tell your parents." They thanked him for his help as he drove off into the night. Ashley started down the block toward her house, only half a street away. The others stayed together, watching her go under the dim streetlights. "See you tomorrow," Ashley called back, waving. It would be the last thing they ever heard her say. At 5 a.m., Carmen Ruiz woke with a start. Her daughter Ashley had not come home. That had never happened before. Ashley was responsible. If she was running late, she always called. Carmen threw on her sweater and rushed to knock on her neighbors' doors, the families of the other 4 girls. To her shock, none of the 5 had made it home. "I told her to be back before 4, sobbed Mrs. Guadalupe Morales, Sophia's mother, standing out in the street with Carmen. "She's never disobeyed me like this. Something terrible must have happened." One by one, the mothers of Marina, Claudia, and Fernanda came out, all saying the same thing. Their daughters were missing too. It was Ramiro Sanchez, father of the twins Claudia and Fernanda, who finally said what everyone was thinking. "We can't wait any longer," he said, his voice tight. 5 girls don't just vanish. Something happened last night. The families went together to the nearest police station, the same one Carl had been planning to drive the girls to hours earlier. That morning, March 16th, the on-duty officer in charge, Captain Michael Harris, met them in his office. A veteran, with over 15 years handling missing persons in Phoenix, Harris listened carefully as they explained the entire timeline. The party at the Golden Star, the time they left, the plan to return home together. "Any boyfriends? Anyone who might want to hurt them?" Harris asked, jotting notes in a small green notebook. The parents explained that only Sophia had talked to a boy, Robert, a med student, but it wasn't serious. The others were single, no enemies, no drama. "Drugs, alcohol, trouble at home?" Harris asked, running through the routine questions. The families shook their heads firmly. All 5 girls worked or studied. Ashley had a job at a clothing store. Sophia was training to be a secretary. Marina helped at her family's bakery. The twins worked at a textile plant. No drugs, no criminal records. Harris assigned Detective Luke Morgan to lead the case. Morgan was known for being thorough, dogged, unwilling to let details slip through the cracks. His first stop was the Golden Star Banquet Hall. The manager, Sam Villalobos, remembered the girls clearly. They were together all night, he told Morgan. Danced, laughed, had fun. No problems. They left around 2:30 a.m., all five together, looking fine. Morgan also found Robert, the med student. He was crushed by the news. "We talked all night," Robert said softly. "She was sweet, smart. We planned to see each other next weekend." When they left, I went with my friends to the parking lot. I saw them heading down Jefferson Street then. Nothing. Robert's friends confirmed his story. No fights, no suspicious strangers. The girls just walked away and were gone. Morgan then tracked down Carl, the bus driver. Carl repeated everything he'd told the families, that he'd picked the girls up downtown, that the dark sedan had followed the bus for miles, then disappeared. When he changed route, "Can you describe the car?" Morgan asked, taking notes. "Dark sedan," Carl said. "Black or maybe dark blue, tinted windows. Couldn't see the plates, but it followed us the whole way." The description went out to every patrol unit in the city. But in a city the size of Phoenix, with thousands of cars matching that vague description, it was like hunting a ghost. Days passed, no sign of the girls. The families organized searches across the city. They taped photos to light poles, begged local TV stations to run their story. The press called them the Oak Ridge Five. Reporters came from LA, from Dallas, from across the country. The media storm brought more police resources, kidnapping experts, organized crime units, anyone who could help. Every security camera on the route was checked. But in 1996, cameras were rare. The few blurry images showed the girls leaving downtown, nothing more. Weeks later, anonymous tips began pouring in. Sightings in Tucson, in Vegas, even in Mexico. Each one proved false, mistaken identity, bad leads, nothing solid. Then, 3 months after the disappearance, the call came. A distorted voice, filtered through some kind of device, spoke just 11 words to the Phoenix Police Department. "The girls are fine, stop looking. They're somewhere no one can hurt them." The line went dead before it could be traced. Detective Morgan chased leads for 2 years. Hundreds of interviews, every anonymous call. Federal agencies brought in. Nothing. As time passed, the case grew cold. Reporters stopped calling. The public moved on. The families were left alone with their grief. Carmen Ruiz never stopped searching for Ashley. Every morning she posted new flyers, asked strangers on the street, checked hospitals, morgues. "A mother knows," she would say. "I feel it. Ashley's alive. She's waiting for me." Sophia's mother kept her daughter's bedroom frozen in time. The unworn dress on the bed, the shoes she didn't pick in the closet, the perfume bottle on the dresser. "When she comes back," she would whisper, "I want everything just the way it was." Ramiro Sanchez, father of the twins, fell into a deep depression. Claudia and Fernanda had been his pride. 2 hard-working, identical daughters who had gone everywhere together since they were little girls. The thought that they might be separated, or worse, that something terrible had happened, ate away at him day and night. He started drinking heavily and eventually lost the factory job he'd held for 15 years. Marina's parents, Joseph and Mary Ellen, channeled their grief differently. They became activists for families of the missing, organizing marches, demanding action from authorities, helping others facing the same nightmare. "If we can't find our daughter," Joseph told reporters, "then at least maybe we can help someone else find theirs." Detective Luke Morgan, though reassigned to other cases, never forgot the Oak Ridge Five. Every time a similar case popped up or a new lead surfaced, he personally took it on. He stayed in touch with the families, visiting them on anniversaries, always assuring them the case remained open. In 1999, 3 years after the disappearance, a story hit the papers that reignited hope. A woman who had been kidnapped and held captive for years managed to escape her captors in rural Arizona. During her testimony, she claimed to have seen 5 young women who matched the description of the missing girls from Phoenix. Detective Morgan flew to Arizona immediately to interview her. Her name was Patricia. She was 28 and had been a victim of a trafficking ring operating across several states. "I saw them in a big house, like a ranch," Patricia told him, her voice shaking. 5 girls, always together. They wouldn't let me talk to them, but I saw them cross the yard every day. She described them in detail. 1 taller with long dark hair, 2 who were clearly twins, 1 with curly hair, another smaller, thinner girl. It matched Ashley, Sophia, Claudia, Fernanda, and Marina perfectly. "Do you know where that house was?" Morgan asked urgently. Patricia could only give rough directions. A rural area surrounded by farmland near a small town whose name she couldn't remember. She had escaped at night, running along dirt roads until a trucker picked her up and took her to police. A joint operation was launched between Arizona law enforcement and federal agents. For weeks, search teams scoured the countryside Patricia had described, checking ranches, questioning locals, chasing any lead that might bring them to the missing girls. They found several suspicious properties, some tied to criminal activity, but none with hard evidence of the Oak Ridge 5. One property seemed especially promising. Abandoned recently, with women's clothing, personal hygiene items, and rooms that looked like makeshift cells. But by the time police got there, it was empty. Patricia was brought to Phoenix so the families could question her directly. In a tearful meeting at the police station, the mothers showed her photos, described personalities, habits, anything to confirm what she'd seen. "The tall one always protected the others," Patricia said, pointing at Ashley's picture. "She seemed like their leader. And the twins, always holding hands." The details convinced the families Patricia had really seen them alive, though no one knew how much time had passed since then. The investigation in Arizona continued for months, but gradually lost momentum as leads dried up. Authorities dismantled several trafficking networks, which was hailed as a success, but the 5 girls remained missing. As years passed, the Oak Ridge 5 became an urban legend in Phoenix. People claimed sightings in bus stations, in markets, in other states. Conspiracy theories sprouted, that they had been trafficked, that they had run away to start new lives, that they had been murdered and buried somewhere remote. The families never stopped searching. Every March 16th, they held a silent march from Oak Ridge to downtown Phoenix, following the same route their daughters had taken that night. They carried large photos and banners reading, "28 years without answers. We have not forgotten. We want justice." Detective Morgan, nearing retirement, still reviewed the case file from time to time. It filled several cabinets now. Testimonies, maps, photos, reports. One of the most documented cases in Phoenix history, but also one of the most frustrating for its lack of resolution. In 2010, 14 years after the disappearance, technology offered a new tool. Social media exploded. Families launched websites, posted photos on Facebook, used every platform to keep the case alive. One post led to an unexpected tip. A woman in Los Angeles messaged the family, claiming she had worked with a young woman in a California textile factory who looked exactly like Sophia. "She says her name is Sophia," the message read, "but claims she's from Colombia. When she speaks Spanish, though, it's got a Mexican accent, specifically Guadalajara." The families were ecstatic. Mrs. Guadalupe, Sophia's mother, immediately arranged to travel to LA to check for herself. But when she finally met the woman, her hopes collapsed. The resemblance was uncanny, but the age didn't match. The woman also had a scar on her hand Sophia never had. False hopes became routine. Every few months, a new tip appeared, a sighting, a rumor, a possible lead, only to end in disappointment. In 2015, the case gained fresh attention when a Mexico City journalist produced a documentary on unsolved disappearances. The Oak Ridge 5 were featured as one of the most haunting cases of the 1990s. The program brought new witnesses forward. A retired police officer claimed that back in 1996, there had been intelligence about a trafficking ring targeting groups of young women at social events. "It was a pattern," she said. They followed groups of friends after parties, dances, waited for the right moment. It matched Carl the bus driver's account of the dark sedan and explained why all 5 girls had vanished together instead of just one. The ex-officer, whose name was withheld for safety, provided names of suspects. Many were dead or in prison for other crimes. Some were still free. New investigations launched, but after so many years, leads were cold. One name stood out, a man known only as the Shadow, alleged to have coordinated several kidnappings in Phoenix during the 90s. Investigators found him in federal prison, serving time for unrelated crimes. During questioning, he denied involvement in the Oak Ridge 5 case, but his evasive answers, his nervous demeanor, convinced detectives he knew far more than he admitted. The Shadow finally admitted he knew about the case, but claimed it had been carried out by outsiders, people from other states who came to Phoenix for that one operation. According to him, the 5 girls had been taken out of Arizona the very night they disappeared, transported north with an unknown destination. His story lined up with Patricia's testimony, the woman who had escaped years earlier and said she'd seen the 5 girls alive in rural Arizona. But after so many false leads, investigators were careful. They weren't ready to believe the word of criminals who might be lying to shave years off their sentences. By then, Detective Luke Morgan had retired, but he stayed on as a volunteer, consultant. He kept in touch with investigators across multiple states and with federal agencies, because the possibility that the girls had been trafficked across state lines, or even out of the country, was very real. The late 90s had been peak years for human trafficking networks operating across the U.S.-Mexico border. As the mothers aged, their fight shifted. It wasn't only about finding their daughters anymore, it was about helping other families survive the same nightmare. They founded Searching Mothers of Oak Ridge, a group offering emotional support, legal guidance, and public advocacy for families of the missing. Carmen Ruiz, Ashley's mother, became the group's spokesperson. Even in her 70s, she was tireless. "I will not die without knowing what happened to my daughter," she told reporters, "and if I can't find her, at least I will make sure other families don't go through what we did." Their organization pushed for better missing persons protocols, centralized databases, and proper training for officers handling these cases. They raised funds to hire private investigators and use advanced technology in searches. In 2020, the families began using facial recognition systems and genetic databases worldwide. They submitted DNA samples, uploaded age-progressed images, and connected with international agencies. Results came back with possible matches, women in different countries with some similarities, but none were definitive. Every lead ended in disappointment. Then COVID-19 hit. The pandemic crippled search efforts in 2020 and 2021. Travel restrictions shut down investigations. Awareness marches stopped. Some mothers, now elderly, became seriously ill. Marina's mother, Mary Ellen, died from COVID complications in late 2021. Her husband Joseph said her last words were, "Stay safe, Marina, wherever you are." Her death devastated the other families. At the funeral, hundreds gathered. Human rights advocates, local officials, families of the missing. The Oak Ridge 5 had become a symbol for every missing person in Arizona. Afterward, the surviving mothers made a promise. "Mary Ellen died without finding Marina," Carmen said. "We can't let that happen to us. We have to find our daughters while we're still alive to hold them." In 2022, they organized a massive search across northern Arizona and nearby states. Civilian volunteers, local police, and federal agencies joined forces. They didn't find the Oak Ridge 5, but they uncovered remains of other missing people, giving closure to families who had waited decades. More importantly, the search revealed historical trafficking routes from the 90s, rural roads, abandoned ranches, safe houses used to move victims across states and eventually into other countries. Investigators mapped them all, feeding the information into the Oak Ridge case files. Ground-penetrating radar teams searched suspicious properties. Nothing directly tied to the 5 girls was found. Then came January 2024. Exactly 28 years after the disappearance, a call changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon. A call came to Phoenix PD. A call that at first sounded like just another false lead. The dispatcher answered in the usual way, but there was no voice, just heavy, uneven breathing, maybe muffled sobbing. "Hello? Can you hear me?" The dispatcher said gently. "If you need help, make some kind of noise." A thud hit the phone. Then faintly, a single whispered word. "Ashley." The dispatcher froze, then signaled her supervisor. The call was recorded, traced, back to a payphone at a gas station on the edge of Phoenix. By the time police arrived, the caller was gone. Surveillance footage showed only a hooded figure leaving in a car too far for cameras to capture clearly. Forensic audio experts analyzed the recording. They estimated the voice belonged to a woman in her 40s or 50s, the same age the missing girls would be now. Background noise suggested a busy roadside location. The families were notified immediately. Carmen Ruiz, now 80, but still sharp, listened to the recording over and over. "That's my daughter," she said through tears. "That's Ashley. She's alive. She's trying to reach us." Other relatives weren't so sure. 28 years of false hopes had made them cautious. But this call felt different. The name, the location, the timing. It all pointed to someone who truly knew the case. Police blanketed the area with surveillance cameras, hoping for another call. They released age-progressed images of the 5 women to the public. 3 days later, another call came, this time from a payphone downtown, blocks from where the Golden Star banquet hall had once stood. The voice, clearer now, said just one thing before the line went dead. "We're alive. They can't find us. We're being watched." The plural, we, stunned everyone. After all these years, could all 5 still be together? Detective Morgan, brought out of retirement to consult, told the families, "The caller knows the case history. They're choosing locations tied to the original disappearance. This isn't random. They're sending a message." The third call came a week later, this time from a payphone near the Oak Ridge neighborhood, where the 5 young women had lived before that night in 1996. This time, the voice was clearer, the words unmistakable. "Mom, don't stop looking. We're dying. We need help, but we can't escape." For the families, it was the most emotional call yet. Carmen Ruiz collapsed in tears the moment she heard it, convinced beyond doubt that it was her daughter Ashley speaking. "After all these years, I always knew she was alive," she sobbed over and over. "I always knew she would call me one day," but the words carried something far darker too. "We're dying" meant they were in immediate danger, possibly sick, abused, or both. "We can't escape," confirmed what no one wanted to admit. After 28 years, they were still captives. Federal authorities formally took over the case after the third call. A special FBI-led task force was launched in cooperation with Arizona State Police, equipped with advanced surveillance tools to trace every public phone in Phoenix and surrounding cities. Undercover teams staked out areas where the calls had originated, hoping to identify whoever was making them. But the fourth call never came. Weeks passed. Phones stayed silent. Investigators began to fear the worst, that the caller had been discovered by her captors, or moved somewhere she no longer had access to a phone. The families lived in constant dread, waiting for news, any news. Every day without a call felt heavier than the last. Then, 2 months later, came something no one expected. A package arrived at Phoenix PD, addressed specifically to the Oak Ridge 5 task force. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. 5 middle-aged women sat together in what looked like a backyard or garden. Their faces were older, lined by years, but the families recognized them instantly. Ashley, Sophia, Marina, Claudia, Fernanda. Forensic experts examined the photo. No signs of digital tampering. Taken recently, within the past 6 months, they concluded. Analysis of the background, vegetation, architecture, suggested northern Mexico. Maybe Sonora, maybe Chihuahua. On the back, in shaky handwriting, were 5 words. "We're still together, not free," and a place name, Los Alamos. Los Alamos, a small, dusty Sonora town near the U.S. border, long known as a corridor for human and drug trafficking. A rescue operation launched immediately. Federal agents, local police, and the families themselves traveled to Sonora, searching every ranch, every abandoned building, every rumored safe house. But Los Alamos was a hornet's nest, half its territory controlled by cartels, half by terrified civilians who said little and trusted no one. Within days, evidence surfaced. A property with women's clothing, hygiene products, prescription medicine, signs of life, recent life. But it was too late. The place had been emptied before the raid. Someone had tipped them off. The captors were moving faster than law enforcement, always one step ahead. The search expanded across Sonora, then toward the U.S. border. That's when a migrant worker came forward. He said he'd seen 5 women matching the description, loaded into a truck with armed men, heading north, straight toward Arizona. The FBI mobilized. Border surveillance intensified. Age-progressed images of the Oak Ridge 5 went out to every agency across Arizona, California, New Mexico, and Texas. For the first time in 28 years, there was hard evidence they were alive. And then, March 15, 2024. Exactly 28 years and 1 day after they vanished, the call finally came. One of the women had found a cell phone. She gave GPS coordinates. A joint task force, FBI, Arizona State, police, federal agents from Mexico, moved in on a remote ranch outside Phoenix. Inside, they found them, all 5, Ashley, Sophia, Marina, Claudia, Fernanda, alive, malnourished, scarred, but alive. The ranch was a prison complex, separate rooms, locked gates, watchtowers, but the women had stayed together, cared for each other, kept each other alive through nearly 3 decades of captivity. They were rushed to a Phoenix hospital for medical care. Doctors confirmed years of physical and psychological abuse, but also something extraordinary. Despite everything, they were stable. The families flew in that night. Carmen Ruiz, now 80 years old, clung to her daughter Ashley, now 48, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. "I never stopped believing you'd come home," she whispered. "I never stopped looking." The rescue shattered a trafficking ring that had operated for over 30 years across Mexico and the U.S. Dozens of arrests followed. Other victims were found because of the information the Oak Ridge 5 provided. For the women, recovery would be long, physically, emotionally, spiritually. They had to learn how to live in a world that had changed beyond recognition, but they would do it together, just like they had survived, together. Their story became a symbol of hope for thousands of families still searching for missing loved ones. Proof that even after decades, it's never too late to bring someone home.